Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Dr. Arland Hill with Food Function Freedom, and I am your functional food advocate. Now, today we're going to be talking about gastrointestinal health and really the broad spectrum of things that are associated with gastrointestinal health. And today I've got with me Dr. Debbie Bright, and I'm going to tell you an introduction. I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal story that Dr. Bright and I have and how we got to know each other. So Dr. Bright's a functional medicine practitioner. She has a background, has a master's in nutrition and human performance, so her background is well suited to our conversation today. And in the social media arena, she's known as the Look Good Naked Doctor. So that's a pretty cool title to be able to have, and really says what she's able to do for the patients that she works with. But what we're going to talk about today is one of her core interests too, and that is gastrointestinal health. Now, I told you that Dr. Bright and I got to know each other, and earlier this year I was out in Anaheim, California, and she came up to a seminar that I was hosting and delivering some information. Oh, look at that. She's got the book right there for this seminar. How funny. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, it's my Bible.
Yeah, that's your Bible. That's awesome. And we got to know each other, but what I thought was so cool is that about 2 months, maybe a little more later, we ran into each other again out at another conference out in San Francisco, and Dr. Bright came up to me and said, hey, look, I have taken your information and we have gotten this information built into a package, and my patients are getting such great success. And I wanted everyone to really hear from a practitioner who took that information and who is being successful with her patient base, and what that really looks like to help you guys get educated so that you can start making changes right away. So first off, Doc, tell me something. When you think about the gastrointestinal tract, like, what comes to mind for you on that? Like, what type of things are you associating that with?
So I think it's, the new fly word that everybody's catching on to is microbiome. And all the new science is going out to say that our little healthy gut buddies are what's fueling our immune system, keeping us from being sick. If we are sick, it's what is the primary area to address, right? Like you're hearing words like leaky gut and microbiome and probiotics and kombucha and just all this stuff. So it's starting to catch fire. But I think because it's so new still, that people they're interested in it and like, hey, what does that mean? But we're at a point where we're trying to, develop programs and bring this in and trying to teach the patient that what the end of their fork, that contributes to this whole microbiome health or destruction, the medications that they're on, whatever. And I'm just really starting to see that health begins in the gut. Like, it's all just address what you're eating, address how it affects the body, and then looking at the body from a state of that maybe diseases don't exist. It's just the state of what kind of health is your body in, and then treating that, and then watching everything else just blossom from there.
Yeah, and I love that idea, and I'll take this back to something that I actually came across this very morning, which was a quote by Hippocrates where he was talking about, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it was essentially saying that life begins and ends in the gastrointestinal tract, right? And that's probably no more relevant than in this day and age where so many people are bombarding their gastrointestinal tract with things that it's never really meant to handle. I mean, if you look at some of the processed foods that individuals are out there consuming, and certainly some of the stresses that we apply to our bodies, those are things that are related to a modern day environment. Those are not things that evolutionarily that we were ever meant to have to endure. So, as you brought up the effects that this has on the microbiome and the shifts, and there's so much conversation around that, when you think about this, give me an idea of when you start to talk to a patient, like, how does this conversation begin to evolve with the patient as you're beginning to educate them about the role that the GI tract plays?
So what's really funny, because you'll hear patients come in and they've got a whole slew of stuff, right? The range is just everything under the sun. I have headaches. I have psoriasis. I have adult acne. I have joint pain. And there's all this different stuff going on, and they've got all these medications for it. And what it basically comes down to is we're only treating symptoms, and they're not really getting any better. Maybe it's just maintained at a baseline, but these people really don't feel good. So I kind of bring the conversation in and I really dial them in on food sensitivities. That's where we kind of start. So my programs are set on taking out, gluten, soy, dairy, eggs, corn, sugar, peanuts, and artificial sweeteners. And they kind of look at me like, whoa, what am I even eating, right? Like, that's everything that I eat. And I'm like, okay, guys, if I ran functional labs on you, these are the heavy hitters that come back in 100% of people, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of describe it to him. I don't know if you've ever heard this from Tom O'Brien. I can't really take full credit for this, but he describes the GI tract as an entire tube, right? From mouth to anus, essentially. There's a lot going on as far as digestion, breaking down our foods, providing the body the nutrients that, it needs to flourish. So the tube is essentially 25 feet long, and it has an absorption, the square foot the size of a tennis court, right? And so inside of the gut are these like shags, and they're hanging out in there, and they're absorbing our nutrients. Like, this one absorbs calcium, and this one absorbs our proteins, and this one absorbs fat. Whatever nutrient it is, there's always something there for it to bind to and take it into the bloodstream. Now, if you have celiac disease or leaky gut or whatever, those shags start to wear down, right? So you're not absorbing these micronutrients. And then in between the shags, we've got, let's say, a filter system, and it's about a cell length thick. That's not much, right, between the body and the blood. And exactly. And I'm pretty sure you were teaching us that really changes that mucosal lining about every hour, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty fast. I mean, there's definitely a high energy demand, high turnover environment in the guts. You've got to keep it. You've got to continue to give it what it needs to regenerate.
Exactly. So I explained to them, like, you eat your food. Let's say maybe your stomach acid is weak, or you've been on medications that are causing that barrier layer to start to break down. So these foods, it should be, you eat it, and it should get smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes through the digestive tract, and then be absorbed as a nutrient. Well, now it's leaking. You have leaky gut, right? This mucosal layer's broken down, and it's starting to slip into the bloodstream, right? And now you've got your immune system coming in, and it's like, hey, this is not okay. We're going to take these things out. So people are saying, I ate all these foods all my life, and now all of a sudden they're causing me this huge reaction. And it's the gluten, it's the dairy, it's the soy, it's all those things I named. And then it's random things like broccoli, like tangerines or whatever. And so when I have a patient come in and they've got a slew of food sensitivities, I say, hey, let's start addressing that leaky gut, that gut health. Let's repair your microbiome. Let's run some stool labs, some micronutrient deficiency labs. Let's put you through a food sensitivity profile, and let's go on a gut repair system. And they literally will start to feel better within 4 days. Yeah. I mean, it happens so fast, right? And then on the other side of it, at least with my programs, people find me because, look good naked, right? It's like funny. They want to do weight loss. But weight loss ends up being secondary to what they get, because they get energy, they get skin health, they get clear of brain fog. So there's just so many things that go on, and I have plenty of patient testimonials I could just read off to you, because this 21-day program is like really doing far greater than what I ever thought it would as far as like changing patient lives. But it's just as simple as like, let's look at what's going on in your gut. If health starts there, then everything you're eating that's causing inflammation has got to go, right? And they can literally change. They vote with their fork every meal, every single meal. So that's where we're going with running this program.
I love that statement you just made, vote with your fork, because one of my core statements is optimal health is a choice, and voting is a choice. You get to decide what action you're going to take, and every time, I love that, Doc, that is great. Every time you pick up that fork, you're making a choice. You're making a decision about what the trajectory of your health is going to be. There are so many things that you just said right there in those few statements that I just could follow up on literally for hours on talking about this stuff with you. And I think you and I probably share that excitement when we start talking about gut health, and we love all the intricacies of it. But one of the things that I want to really highlight in what you said is that so many people think about gastrointestinal health, and maybe they've seen an ad on TV, or maybe they've even picked up some type of publication or seen something online that talks about probiotics. And again, in fairness, you and I started out today talking about the microbiome. But, you know, as you look at that, if someone is simply taking a probiotic and they look at this and they say, well, I took a probiotic and I didn't see the result that I was expecting from the probiotic, what I want to point out is the complexity that actually occurs in the gastrointestinal tract, because as you just noted, to get a true read on what's going on in the gastrointestinal tract, you can't just take a probiotic. You have to look in there. You have to take a stool assessment. You have to understand the dynamics of how these microorganisms are interacting with each other. What's the inflammatory state? What's the role that the immune system's playing? How are nutrients playing a role? Or more importantly, the deficiency or lack of nutrients setting up a state of dysfunction. And so many people are in this paradigm of, you know, we can't really do anything until there's a disease state sitting there. But the reality of that, as you've pointed out, is that there's so much dysfunction of disease. So no one wakes up with a disease after being completely healthy the day before, right? There's a trend of dysfunction that has to manifest that ultimately leads to that disease. And what you and I are talking about is what I like to refer to as the gray zone that no one, by and large, in conventional circles likes to follow up on. But it's so important, because that's where the patient is symptomatic, and that's when they're asking and begging for help, but nobody's listening to them, right?
Right. I try to tell my patients that disease starts in an area like, are you feeling tired all the time? You know, there's something going on there. Let's just address like your energy levels, the symptoms of, you know, it's not okay not to have a bowel movement every day. Like that stuff you're eating junk, it's inflaming your gut, and then it's sitting in there just putrefying and feeding bad bacteria. And, you know, they're like, oh, but my doctor says if I go every 3 days, that's normal. And I'm like, we really got to address that, right?
Yeah.
You brought up something, I knew we were going to talk today, and I put this down in my notes about you can't just take a probiotic and call it a day. And the probiotics out there are not, let's talk what's on the CVS shelf or Walgreens versus like, Designs for Health or Apex or any of these professional grade brands. And in your course, I know you talked about like, you could look up BioTrack online. Will you elaborate on that a little bit and tell our listeners, you know, what makes the real difference in a probiotic?
Yeah, and that's such a great point that you bring up, because one of the things that I hear a lot of patients do is when they bring in a probiotic, a lot of times the conversation is based around, well, how large is the number of organisms that are in that probiotic? And what's important to note here is not how many organisms are in the probiotic. What's important to note is how much of that number actually gets delivered to the large intestine. That's the real game changer. Now, you brought up the conversation around BioTracks, and BioTracks are going to be a protective entity that actually allows that probiotic to get through the harsh environment of the stomach and the upper small intestine, where the number of bacteria are relatively small. We don't want to see bacteria there, and in fact, when we do, that's what we term SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? That's a dysfunction in and of itself and creates its own list of problems. But we want to get those bacteria past that point. We want to get them down into the large intestine, and then once they're there, all the benefits that we talk about with regards to probiotics, whether it's modulation of the immune system or looking at producing different nutrients and integrating with, you know, so many different other systems in the body, the brain-gut connection, the probiotics play a massive role there as well. All of that is solely dependent on how much of that can actually be delivered to the large intestine, because that's pretty much the niche of those organisms. That's where they want to be at.
Exactly. You talked about SIBO, and I know a lot of people are like, SIBO, like what's that, you know? And I think people are relatively familiar now with Candida, and they're hearing a lot about Candida and the gut lining. And, you know, I didn't become a functional medicine practitioner because, I was trying to fix myself. Let's be a little selfish here, right? But, you know, through grad school, stress, moving to San Diego from Missouri, I was sick a lot, whether it was it was always bronchitis in the winter and then sinus infections in the fall, and I was on antibiotics all the time. So I ran my own stool labs. I had a low microbiome diversity, I was bloating all the time just on everything I was eating. There was SIBO there. Just showing low, just, I'm like blanking on what I want to say here. There was like high methane producing bacteria. All signs were pointing to SIBO. I was miserable, and then it's amazing what you can do with people when you just take out the inflammation, put in the phytonutrients from some plants, add in some supplementation because, our food is lacking in nutrients.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, and then just turning it around. And I think that's the biggest thing is getting patients to really grasp that, health does start in the gut. And, they kind of look at you like you're crazy, like, what do you mean you don't want me to drink milk, dairy milk, or, whatnot. And we're on such a cutting edge way of treatment that it's just really great that I'm seeing. I think in our lifetime, we're going to see the shift from symptom suppression in conventional medicine to really realizing this is the way that patients need to be treated.
Well, it's really interesting even around what you and I are discussing today, because I know when I first started practicing, leaky gut was still this term that was in the shadows. You only talked about it if you were out there on the fringe, right? If you were talking about leaky gut, you were you were definitely not mainstream. You were more the oddball practitioner, right? And now you can actually go look up journal articles that talk about leaky gut or intestinal hyperpermeability. I mean, it's everywhere in the literature. It's more of a mainstream thought process now. So, we definitely, I agree with you. We're going to see a shift where we have to go back to addressing these core areas of dysfunction. And I think so many people are lost in actually the lifestyle and the dietary habits that allow them to be able to address those core functions. And I think that's where something like your 21-day program becomes so instrumental in helping them reestablish those habits. And actually, let's do that. Let's go ahead and talk about that, because that was something that I really, when you and I met out in San Francisco for the second time there and we were conversing, I was just blown away by what you had been able to set up and be able to implement and get patients to do in 21 days. But I think this really speaks to what we were alluding to earlier, is that when you address multiple aspects of the gastrointestinal tract and you don't look at, well, this is going to be the magic approach, that, I'm going to take this probiotic and that's going to get the job done, but yet you take that very comprehensive approach. To me, then it becomes not really surprising when I really think through all this. Well, yeah, that makes sense why in 21 days she's knocking it out of the park with these patients, right? And I'm reading your testimonials on Facebook and I'm like, this is awesome what these patients are saying. This is literally life-changing stuff that I was reading in these testimonials that these patients were presenting back. I was just astounded. I was like, that is great work you're doing.
I got one this morning because so I launched the second Look Good Naked challenge in April, and we just finished it on Sunday. And I made a few program changes from the first one to the second one. And the biggest thing I added in was bone broth. Oh my God. The weight loss got even better, like from an average of 7 to 14 pounds. Now we're averaging 18 to 21 pounds in 21 days.
That's awesome.
And now, mind you, that sounds amazing. That's not even the biggest part. So I'm going to read you this one because it came in.
Please do.
Okay. This was one of my Louisiana patients. Now, mind you, this thing has gotten so much attention. I have people I'm in San Diego, remember. Most of my people came out of Missouri because that's where I'm from, a small town there. They all follow me on social media. So it started there, and then it branched out, and now I have people East Coast, West Coast, Australia, Canada.
Nice.
I know, and I've been using Designs for Health products with them, and I got to talk to the company. We got to be able to get some stuff out people internationally. But anyway, so this lady, her daughter did the program first, and then she did the second one, and she brought a team of family members. Wow. And her mom messaged me. She says, I got the phone here with it. Good morning and a good start to the day. I hit 20 pounds of weight loss today. So today would be day 22. and my lab results are in. My cholesterol went from 183 down to 132. Got a phone call, I just had to ignore it. My low density lipoprotein, or the bad cholesterol, went from 86 down to 48, and my triglycerides went from 151 to 110. I am so excited. The doctor said I can stop all my medications, including my blood pressure and my psoriasis medication, if I choose to, and continue with my lifestyle modifications, because I have lost more than 10% body weight, and I recheck all my labs in 6 weeks again. It's so exciting for me, but a little scary to get off the medicine. I'm not going to change my new habits that I've learned from you, because I don't want my levels to go up again from stopping the medicine. And I just want to circle back to when you brought up health as a choice. I made a statement on Facebook, like, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, last fall, whatever. And I said, health is a choice. Now, what if your cancer and your autoimmune disease was a choice? And I got so much crap for this, but what I really meant, and if I can get patients to think of it like this, if you smoke, right, and you die of lung cancer, people say, oh my God, that's just so sad. But, they chose to smoke. Well, it's the same thing with these other diseases. The only thing is the patients don't know what they're doing that can make a difference in their life. So health is a choice. And this lady, like this message, I told her, I was like, it's not the medications that were doing anything for you. It's that you chose to address your gut health, to have faith in the program, and you've changed your life in 21 days. Couldn't believe it. And I've got other ones where they said, I've never been free of psoriasis until now, 7 days into the program. When I created this, Doc, I had no idea where this was going to go. I'm going to reach out for it. So here's a little manual I created, right? Our little 21-day, oh, it's looking naked, it's fun, whatever.
Yep.
What they get is, I've got a supplement schedule in here. I don't know if you guys can see it, where I'm using, we're using some of the Designs for Health, some of the pure paleo protein, right? Good hydro beef, good source of protein, clean ingredients. Of course, we put them on a probiotic, right? But I also put them on the GI Revive, right? So huge for gut health. And I don't have my canister with me because we just ran out of the paleo fiber. So that's the gist of the supplements right there. I kept it pretty simple. We take them off the gluten, soy, dairy, eggs, corn, sugar, peanuts, and artificial sweeteners. They do a meal replacement shake every morning for breakfast. And we're talking nutrient-dense, coconut oils in it. We put greens in it. We put almond milk or coconut milk, their protein, their fiber. So they're able to feel satisfied, use ingredients that in their shakes that taste really good, so they're happy with what they're getting. And then they're able to go 4 to 6 hours between meals, so their blood sugar stabilizes, right? They're like, but other people have said I need to eat, like, I've heard things from every 30 minutes to 2 hours, and I'm like, no, like, your blood sugar is going like this, right? And insulin's being released, and it's just not good. I'm like, let's just have faith in me, right? I'm like, just. Another couple of staples, they have a list of reoccurring recipes in their program. So I give them a blended green soup. So we kind of take it down to being almost like baby food, right? So it's really easy on the gut, really easy to absorb. That's got arugula and garlic and onions and lemon in it. I up their hydration levels. I put baked apples in there. I was watching the documentary series Betrayal. I don't know, have you heard of that one?
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's by Tom O'Brien. It's his.
Okay.
And I was sitting one night and I was like designing this program, and they were talking about how a probiotic won't make the difference if it doesn't have prebiotics to help it flourish, right? Which means phytonutrients, which means just eating plants and the right foods that help the probiotic. It feeds them, and then they can flourish and live in the intestinal tract.
Right.
So I put them on, inside Betrayal, they were talking about cooked apples. And I was like, well, you guys are getting baked apples for 21 days. So they got that, and then I added in the bone broth this round, and it really just has made a difference. And then, of course, the dinner recipes are clean, lean protein, whether it's chicken, beef, lamb, fish, and then making sure they have lots of greens, and then salads. They get to choose their vegetables. They got a lot of choice in what they get to do. But yeah, we're taking them off inflammatory foods, putting in the gut healing supplements, making sure they get their phytonutrients, and the success happens in week 1.
I love it, because I one of the things that I'm hearing in this, and I think, one of the things that is probably so important to point out here is that most people probably, I would imagine, when they come to something like this, in their mind, the initial thing that they're thinking about is, I'd love to lose some weight, right? But the reality of that is, as you alluded to when we first started talking, is that not being able to lose weight is really a symptom. It's really a manifestation of some bigger underlying dysfunction that's occurring, because when the body is optimally functioning, weight is really not a challenge to maintain or keep into a steady state. It's actually fairly easy, if you will. But I think it's important to note, just in the testimonial you read, how much change that patient had already seen in other aspects of her health, even outside of just a weight loss. That's great. We were excited, and we all like to see that, not just the patients that we work with, but it's really getting in and changing that person's biochemistry and changing their physiology. And as you're alluding to, and I'm listening to the sort of outline of your program here, one of the things that's so important that you're doing in this is that you're helping people build habits. And if you can build those habits and change those habits and see the success of implementing those habits, you're far more likely to want to stay with them and to follow through. And I know you've heard this just like I have, where someone, maybe even you've already had this with your program, someone does something for 21 days or makes a change, and then they go back to the way that they were previously doing, and oh, do they hate themselves after they do that, right? They just feel the consequences of it.
It's funny that you say that, because I created a little health monster in my fiance, and the program ended, and we went to a wedding the next day. And granted, we tried to stick to, we're going to eat the food, we're going to do the best we can. And he had not had alcohol in his system for he's done 2 programs with me now, which we cleared his adult acne. So he's so into sticking with this. It's hilarious. Yeah. Oh my God, he ate some of the food at the reception. He literally went outside and had to throw up. He got sick. He threw up throughout the night, and the next day. It is amazing, because and that's just one story. All of my people that they're like, right, they end 21 days, are like, I'm going to have a celebration meal. And I'm like, please don't. I've been here. Don't do it. Do not waste it. Right? And that's just all the body's getting cleaned up, and now you're introducing this food, and the immune system just goes nuts, right?
Yeah.
And they are sicker than dogs. It blows my mind. And some of them stick with it, right? They're like, okay, that taught me a real lesson. And some of them don't. And so there's some kind of missing piece there that I'm still trying to figure out, how do we convert them long term, right? There's some mindset training that goes into it. So, I'm going back to the books on that to figure out what can I do with the ones that can't quite fully commit to it long term.
Right. Yeah, there's usually some other components to that we have to dive into with them. But I'm just going to say this to the people that are watching us right now. Both Dr. Bright and I both have given you fair warning. So if you change your diet and then you go back and you suffer from it, we told you so. Don't do it.
Totally. Yeah, I had one girl that she wanted eggs. She ate eggs and she was sicker, just could not stop puking all night from these eggs. But, granted, running the 21-day program is more of a guess, don't test, but we do take them off the main heavy hitters, and they see dramatic improvements. But that girl got to say, it's not, oh, woe is me. People are like, but you don't get to live. And once they get on the other side of it, 4 days in, they're like, I really am living. And that cookie or that Oreo or that nasty cardboard mac and cheese that provide, like, if it's not giving you nutrients, it's an anti-nutrient, right? It's robbing.
Right. Right.
They're like, on the other side of it, they're just like, I don't miss that stuff, you know? And then when they go back and have it, they're like, this doesn't even really, it's not worth it. It didn't even taste that good.
Right.
Yeah, but they get to, some of them figure out what some of those food sensitivities are just by going off of it in 21 days, which is pretty cool.
And that's big. I know you've mentioned a couple of these as we've gone through, and one of the things that was sort of jumping into my mind as I was listening to you list these foods is that, and any of our listeners can go do this, you guys can go to the FDA's website and look up the top FDA food allergens, and you're going to see that the foods that are listed on that top allergen list are almost verbatim the ones that you've listed through this presentation today. So yeah, those are things that you've got to get out of your diet. They're problematic foods, and that there's nothing that probably any of us see that's going to be changing that in the near future. So these foods have to come out of the diet. The dairies, the grains, the soys, they're just going to be issue foods long term now. So I want to at this point, let's give the folks that are listening, let's give them two mindsets, because I'm sure someone is asking, we've talked about all this gastrointestinal information, we've talked about leaky gut, and I'm sure people are asking themselves, well, is that something I have? And I'm just going to go ahead and give you a little prelude, guys. Probably. It's a high probability that your GI tract's a little disrupted and you've probably got some degree of leaky gut or imbalance of your different bacteria and organisms going on. But Doc, I want you to, if you can, let's tell everyone and I'm going to break this down into two areas. Let's tell them the symptoms or what they might be experiencing that they would think about as gut-related symptoms that might tell them, okay, it's time for me to follow up. And then after that, I want to transition to the non-gut related symptoms.
Right. I think, it's pretty obvious, the gut stuff. Are you constipated? Do you have diarrhea? Gas and bloating, right? Like some people are like, oh, I just get gas on this. Oh, that's normal. No, gas is not normal. There's nothing normal about that, right? Do you have indigestion? Is there nausea? Like anything that's just related to you eating something and feeling bad, I mean, that's just obvious, right? Those are the obvious things. I don't know if I'm missing something, if you want to throw anything in there.
No, I think you're hitting the big ones. The only one that I will elaborate on is when constipation, and what I want to elaborate on about this is what is the definition of constipation. And guys, if you're not having a bowel movement after every major meal, so if you're not having 2 to 3 bowel movements a day, you are constipated. That is the definition. Going every other day or even for longer stints than that, I have the longest I have heard up to one of my patients telling me is 21 days, right? And that is just unfathomable to me. But the point being is that just ask yourself, how frequently are you having a bowel movement? And if you're not having a bowel movement 2 to 3 times a day, your bowels are sluggish. They're not moving as fast as they need to be.
Right. And with that, it's funny because on the 21-day program, some of this stuff really shows up and people are like, other people are getting results and I'm super constipated and I'm not. And I'm like, one thing about the program is like, yeah, you might get results. And if you're not, we got to dig a little deeper, right? We got to guess, don't test, into test, don't guess, right? Let's run your food sensitivity labs and your stool profiles and your micronutrients. Let's look at your thyroid. We've got to figure out what's going on there and take it to the next level. And I think that's the biggest thing, Doc, is that people don't get that it really should be 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. Yeah. Like, yeah, they're like, what are you talking, what? I'm like, no, you've got to you should be eating and it should be moving. Right?
Yeah, if you're eating nutrient-rich, fiber-dense foods, you can't put but so much in before something has to come out, right? Exactly. So, I mean, just to put it bluntly. So let's talk about the symptoms that someone might be experiencing that are not gastrointestinal, because like you alluded to, when you've got some gut symptoms going on, well, yeah, it makes sense that I probably need to go follow up and figure out what's going on with my gut. But you and I both know that there are a lot of symptoms that patients deal with that when we hear it, we're thinking, yes, we need to do a gut assessment. We need to figure out what's going on with this patient. But intuitively to them, they're not making that connection. So let's help them understand what kind of things they might want to think about that would be associated with gut dysfunction.
I'm just going to run through the list, and when I get to one that kind of stands out to me or I've got a patient story, I'll elaborate. So okay. Let's just talk, let's say no energy. That's a big one. People are fatigued, and, you know, that's just a huge one that stands out. That's just like the starting point, right? And then headaches, migraines, joint pain. Earlier today, I was just watching a video about how they're doing studies where they take synovial fluid out of the joint, and it's full of bad bacteria, you know. And I have a chiropractic background. I think you as well, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Something just stood out to me where, you know, I had a patient, I was treating his shoulder. I'm doing soft tissue work. I'm doing manipulation. I'm doing all this rehab stuff. And he would get better, but there was a last 10% that just was not, it just was lingering. And this dude is covered in psoriasis. And I'm like, man, if you do not address your gut health, I'm like, that'll go away. The joint pain will get better. It's just, they've got to get that the skin rashes are related to the gut. They've got to get that the headaches are related to the gut. I mean, we can go on to every autoimmune disease you can possibly mention. And, you know, I have Parkinson's patients getting better just by changing their diet. Their medication is decreasing. Neurological symptoms, urinary tract symptoms, that was a big one. You know, that was one that I suffered with. I was always having UTI symptoms, but I didn't have a UTI. And they kept throwing antibiotics at it and wrecked my gut. So that's where, you know, my own personal story started. But, you know, I had one patient I worked with. He was low energy, moody, knee pain. Now, granted, he's an outlier because I don't get this drastic of results with patients, but he was obese. It was 2.5 weeks. He lost 42 pounds and his joint pain cleared like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
amazing. Huge. What's unfortunate was he was a lone wolf out there trying to change his habits, and he felt like he was not supported by, you know, friends, family, coworkers, and his community, and he ended up quitting. But we've since then, you know, he's come back around and worked with me, but it's just, you name the disease and it's there. Dementia, Alzheimer's, it's all starting in the gut. So I'm sure I'll let you run with this. Like, what is some of the stuff that you've seen?
Yeah, I think literally any neurodegenerative condition, whether it's the Parkinson's, the Alzheimer's, any type of dementia, you have to begin to think, and even when someone starts to talk about from the aspect of, I just don't feel like my memory is as sharp as it used to be, and this is scary to me, I'm sure it is to you now too, because I'm literally hearing patients in their 20s come in and say this to me. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what does this look like for you in 20 years if you don't get this under control? So you definitely got the brain-related aspects of health. The other area you alluded to, skin. Anytime anyone sees something on their skin, any type of rash, any type of lesion, any autoimmune eczema, psoriasis, that has to go into the category of autoimmunity. And you'll probably remember one of the things you and I were talking about at the beginning of the year when I did the presentation was that when you have an autoimmune condition, there are core reasons that autoimmunity manifests, and there's really 3 that we always pin this back to. You really can't have an autoimmune condition without these 3, and those are your genetics. You have to have some genetic predisposition. You have to have some type of an environmental trigger, and the last and third piece here, certainly of no less importance, is you have to have some degree of dysfunction in your gastrointestinal tract. And it is a hallmark of autoimmunity. I mean, you literally can't have it without having some dysfunction in the gut. So I think anytime someone has an autoimmune condition, it's not a matter of do we need to test the gastrointestinal tract. It's how soon can we test the gastrointestinal tract, right? So you've got you've got those, and then I guess I'll just close on, like you mentioned, with fatigue. One of the things that I love to talk about with regards to the microbiota is that we probably think too narrow about these guys in that we just think, hey, they're just bacteria hanging out in the gastrointestinal tract. And it's not. They're little powerhouses in there, meaning that they're producing nutrients, they're producing chemicals for our brain, they're producing things that help keep us calm in times of stress. I mean, these are organisms that adapt to the environment around us, and they are literally shaping how we can adapt to that environment.
Exactly. A big thing I like to elaborate on with patients too is everybody wants to blame genetics, but like just because your mom, dad, grandma, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, whoever had a disease, it could be your genetic disposition, but your epigenetics, right? The environment, the food you feed yourself, the way that you think, the way, all this stuff contributes. Your household cleaners and whatnot, all this affects it. And so when I have patients saying, well, my mom had this, or my grandma had this, and now I have this, it's, you grew up in the same house, thinking the same thoughts, eating the same food, with the same household cleaners, drinking the same dirty water, whether, using chemicals in your toothpaste, whatever. That is a genetic weak link where your disease is going to show up. That's why some people get cancer and some people have a thyroid disease. Some people suffer obesity, but they're not necessarily genetically predispositioned to get it unless all the environmental factors add up and are the same, and then that's where they're pulling on that chain, right? And that's where the link breaks.
I'll tell you something on this. One of my instructors, when I was going through chiropractic school and when I was going through my postgraduate nutrition education, one of the comments that he would make is it your genes or is it your familial habits, right? And it's the habits more often than not that get people in trouble and not the genes, because the genes by themselves are not going to be problematic. It's the habits and the activities and the environmental factors that influence how those genes actually act that get us in trouble.
Exactly. I tell my patients it's genetic lifestyle.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So tell me something. So before we started recording here, I told you I'd probably try to keep this thing around 30 minutes, and we both chuckled, and we kind of knew that was never going to happen, right? And of course it hasn't. But when you're passionate about these things like you and I are, we could just sit here and talk about this on and on. But in the interest of time, I want you to, as we sort of start to close here a little bit, I want you to tell those that are listening, I want you to tell them something that you want them to remember related to gastrointestinal function, like something that is a hallmark that you just want to imprint on their mind.
It's like, what do I choose?
Exactly.
I want them to just be willing to accept that if there's a brain issue, depression, anxiety, a sleep problem, any of the gastrointestinal symptoms that we mentioned, medication is only going to suppress your symptoms. It's not going to deliver root cause health care, right? Until you go to the root of the problem and discover what that is. There's no one-size-fits-all medicine. There's no one-size-fits-all diet. But let's just look at what's going on with you individually. And I promise you, whoever you are, if you are sick and you address your gut health, you will see changes so fast and so significant that you cannot deny that this is where medicine needs to head. This is, I don't want to say end all be all, but this is where we're going. If you want to be healthy, it starts with the gut.
Right. And I'll sort of close this out here and say that there is a reason that we call the nervous system of the gastrointestinal tract the second brain. It is literally that instrumental in our body's overall function. And taking it back to Hippocrates, who, if you really look at Hippocrates, he was probably the father of the wellness movement, right? I mean, he was kind of, when it wasn't cool about a wellness movement back centuries ago, but his comment is so core to healthcare today, and that is that death and life begin and end in the colon. And if your GI tract is not healthy, you really can't expect the rest of the body to be healthy either, because essentially it is still the external environment to some degree, and it is the entry point into the rest of the body. And if that entry point and the immune system encompassing that environment are not healthy and stable, none of the rest of the environment is going to be healthy and stable either. So I've really appreciated the points that you've shared here with us today. Now, I also want everyone listening, if they want to take part in your 21-day program and they want to get in touch with you, share with them how they can do that.
Okay, so well, it's funny that you bring that up because I would normally say run over to drdebbiebbright.com. That's DRDEBBIEBRIGHT. It's under construction right now, and I'm about to launch the Look Good Naked #3, which is going to start on June 5th. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. That's probably the best way right now because we're getting everything else lined up. And that's simply facebook.com/DrDebbieBright or Instagram.com/DrDebbieBright, or shoot me an email at drdebbiebbright@gmail.com.
Wow, that's easy. Dr. Debbie Bright, there it is, right? So, Doc, listen, as not only as a colleague, but as a friend, I can't tell you how much I truly appreciate you being on with me today and sharing the wealth of information that you have and what you're out there doing for folks. I hope that, as your program continues to evolve and you get more and more testimonials, I definitely want to get back on here with you again because, as I alluded to, we definitely have far more to say than what we were able to capture in this short time that we got to spend together today. So I truly appreciate you being on with me.
I really thank you for that, and I just want to acknowledge you, Doc, because I've been studying gut health, and it was your course that I took in Anaheim that you laid it out so well, and I was like, I'm confident enough to put this into play in a program. And then my Designs for Health rep, Maria Akerman, and I sat down and we just designed this thing and kicked it out. And like I said, the results speak for themselves. I didn't even know it was going to have this kind of an impact. So I just want to thank you for that. You just gave me the confidence to take this out into the world, and it's rocking.
For sure. No doubt about that. It is definitely doing that. So thank you again. So everyone, thank you for your time today, and thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Arland Hill with Food, Function, Freedom, and I am your functional food advocate. Thanks again, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.